Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another Fear Street book review. It's been a while because I only cover the books that I really love or really hate in full reviews. But we have one that I really loved, and this comes from Fear Street Sagas, and it's book number 15, Door of Death. Now, I recently acquired this for my collection because I've been jonesing to get a copy of this thing to read for some time because I heard a long time ago when people were talking about Fear Street books that might be up my alley, people were recommending this one to me. It's a lesser known Fear Street book. It's in a series where there's known ghostwriters, so obviously there's some bad reputation with Fear Street sagas inherently. But I did hear that this one was the most brutal and most violent of the Fear Street books, and it has arguably the best villain. So I finally picked it up and I read it, and I absolutely loved it. Now, I want to consider myself a typical Fear Street fan, and don't get me wrong. From what I've gathered and what I've come across so far in the Fear Street series, is that most of it tends to run down the murder mystery or thriller side of things, which is fine. But normally that's not my speed, and I actively look for books in this series that feel different or feel more movie quality. In this book, I have to say, it's a damn shame that this one has not been optioned to be turned into a movie for the Fear Street films because this would be a damn good story to adapt. It's got a lot going for it. It's set in the 1800s, it's set around Halloween. You have a killer villain, some really cool ideas that feel like a melding of Final Destination and A Nightmare on Elm Street, and the villain would be absolutely iconic. So, this is a shoe in. This book actually makes me think that possibly in the future I can make a video just sharing books that I think the Fear Street films should adapt, because this is a definite shoe in for that list if I've ever seen one. I know how expensive this book is on the internet. If you're looking to get your hands on a copy of this, it's going to be expensive, but take my word on it. If you don't own this and you want it, go buy this book at a good price and try it out. Do yourself a favor and read this thing. You might love it even more than I did. You might not like it as much as I did, but there's going to be things in here that's going to shock you in the good way. So, seriously, take the time to go check this out. So, Fear Street Sagas, book 15 here. Like all Fear Street Sagas books, this is a ghost written book. The actual author of this one is Eric Weiner. Now, Eric Weiner might not be a household name unless you peel back the surface just a bit. The main things I know him from are these three things. I know he's done this kids horror esque series called Cliffhangers. I've never tried them, but I heard that they're really fun. I know that he made one of my favorite Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes from the revival seasons, and that was The Tale of the Secret Admirer. Fantastic episode. And he's also the creator of Dora the Explorer. Yes, the creator of Dora the Explorer wrote arguably the most brutal Fear Street book. That's a very weird universe that we live in, right? But yeah, he's the actual author here. This is not written by R.L. Stine. It could have been outlined by him. I don't know. Who cares? I'm just giving credit to the ghostwriter here because you turn it on to the copyright page and it tells you who it actually was. So, yeah, I think that this, for a ghost written book, is pretty on standard with some young adult stuff that I've been diving into. I wouldn't say that this is for sure my second favorite Fear Street book that I've read so far, but I would say that this is probably in the contention of second or third. Scream Jennifer Scream, I think, is on the same wavelength of love for me here. I don't know if I would say that one is better than this, maybe in some aspects, but like I said, we'll get into that when we eventually get to me talking about my favorite Fear Street books or something. But nonetheless, we have a book to talk about, so I'm going to get into some spoilers here. I'll try not to give too much away, and leave some open ended things for the end, in case you want to go check this out for yourself. But all you need to know about this book is that Fear Street Sagas tends to take place in the past, and they almost always involve a member of this Fear family. Now, the Fear family goes back to the origins of Shady Side. There was, I think, a rivalry between the Fear family and the Good family. Trust me, I wish I knew the exact details. I haven't read a single Fear Street Saga trilogy book that starts essentially what became sagas. So I'm only going off the general knowledge I know that I knew before I went into watching the original Fear Street trilogy film series. So, but anyways, um, each Saga's book involves a member of the Fear family in some degree and how they're cursed, right? And this book is essentially about this character named Jake Fear. And there's like 3 or 4 times throughout this book that we get a cutaway to Jake Fear's journal. And the first chapter starts you off with a journal entry where Jake is essentially describing himself as like a 60 something year old man who's living in the year 1853, and he spent the past 40 years in his bachelor years and his midlife to later life years as a single man, until one day this girl who's young in age, she's about 17 or 18, mind you, if that's taboo for you to, I guess, read for the first time, a 60-year-old man courting an 18-year-old girl, it was common back then. Very common, actually, especially in this time period, for that to be a thing. So just know that up front. But he meets this girl and he asks her hand in marriage and she agrees. But there ends up being a twist that maybe she is in love with another guy and is perhaps using this um, Jake Fear man that we get to know here in a messed up way. And each successive journal entry that we get throughout the story gives us more information. Well, once we're done with that first journal entry, we get to meet the main cast of characters. And the main character we have to worry about is this girl named Amy Burke. And she is living in 1854, which is a year after um, the events that we see in the journal entries. And her and her friends are, hanging out the day before Halloween. And there's these 2 guys named Richard and Giles. And Richard happens to be Amy's love interest of the story. And Amy, has a weird relationship with Richard because, this is the 1800s. Women aren't quite social the way they are nowadays. So when they go out, they have to be invited out by their friends or by gentlemen or what have you. Um, and Richard, like I said, is her love interest, and she talks about how she's gotten like a romantic letter from him and how she has these feelings for him that possibly could blossom into something more if he would just let it. This is, a young adult series. We're going to be getting into some relationship stuff. But Richard and his friend Giles aren't really looking for love around Halloween. They're looking to scare their friends. And there's these 2 other characters that we get to know. I forget the one of the girls' names. Um, I'm not even gonna try to pretend. It's the best female friend of Amy and this other guy named Everett. Now, Giles and Richard essentially start off the whole story with these kids telling them that the legend of Jake Fear is going to come this Halloween. It's the first year anniversary of his death, and he lost his life essentially due to him being scorned by a lover and possibly murdered. And he's said to haunt the cemetery of Shadyside, and he's going to rise out of the grave on All Hallows Eve, which is October 31st, and he's going to kill people that he deems as worthy of dying. And everybody's like, okay, Richard and Giles, you guys are pulling our string. your FOS essentially without saying it. It means full of shh. You know what I mean? Uh, and they're like, okay, well, if you don't believe us, you know, best of luck to you, essentially. Well, once the group disbands, Amy and a few others notice that there's some pranks possibly being pulled by Richard and Giles because they're pranksters, and there was this whole thing about the previous Halloween where they pulled pranks on the friends and locals in the town. And there's this barn dance that happens in the book that apparently they also messed with the previous Halloween. So they see this bull that perhaps was taken out of its pen and placed in the middle of the street in Shadyside, I think on Fear Street. And there's a cow at the end, so obviously the bull's going to be riled up. And Amy figures that it was Richard that did this, or Giles, and she immediately lets them know how she feels about that, and they're of course denying it and saying that they didn't do it. So Amy, in the back of her mind, is like, okay, then who really did it, right? But to make matters even weirder, after this phenomenon happens, there's this random list of names that's bolted, or I guess nailed to the front of the local church, on the front door. And there's a list of like four names. One involves a blacksmith in town, and the other three belong to um, members of this friend group. One of them being the best female friend of Amy. Then, of course, you have Giles and Richard. And it's marked at the bottom to be from Jake Fear. Now, Amy's programmed to think that, of course, this is a prank, and this is perhaps Richard taking things too far. And when she confronts Richard about the bull and about the list, Richard's like, I really didn't do it. I don't know who did. And Amy's like, okay, stop pulling my chain, dude. You already denied doing the bull thing, and now you're denying doing the list. And he goes, why would I put my own name on a list? Right? And she's like, well, it would make perfect sense to throw people off the scent, because if you and Giles are on the list and you're the ones pranking people, you're going to have immunity and people aren't going to think it's you. And Richard's like, yeah, I think what you want to think, but it's not me, right? Well, to coincide with this, Amy and her best female friend are talking about the upcoming Halloween. And because of this list, this has kind of made Amy paranoid. But at the same time, she really wants to see if her and Richard have real chemistry and a possible future together. And this perhaps involves this old wives' tale that is said, I think it's passed down from like Irish tradition, that if you prepare a meal backwards, or like a supper backwards, on All Hallows Eve, and if you do it a certain way, once it's prepared and once you eat it, eventually you're going to be able to see a vision of who your future husband's going to be. Now, to put this into perspective, there's a whole event that happens before they execute this. And this is the inciting part of the inciting incident for the rest of the book. But essentially, um, Amy devises a plan to get back at Richard and Giles for going too far with the list on the door and with the bull. So she gets all of her friends and cohorts together to essentially stage that Jake Fear has actually risen from the dead, like Richard claimed would happen, and is starting to kill, their friends. And of course, that takes place, and it's revealed to be a complete fake out, and Richard is just being pranked. And Amy's like, look, I got one over on you. And Richard's like, you know what? Good on you. But still, I didn't do the things that you're claiming that I did. And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. Playing coy about it. Well, anyways, like I said, going back to the ritual, this incites them to want to conduct it just to see if Amy will see Richard in her vision. Well, once it commences, she doesn't see Richard. She sees Jake Fear. And for the remainder of the book, she's having these visions and is seemingly seeing the future of people that are on that list that was on the church door dying in gruesome ways. kind of like in like a Final Destination premonition kind of way. And she at first doesn't know how to go about it because all of her friends are desensitized to, the it's the boy who cried wolf scenario where, you know, you claim that this stuff has happened and you're in on the joke. Obviously, none of this stuff is happening or none of this stuff is real, but it's actually happening to her. And simultaneously, she's having these headaches and stuff, and she's hearing voices, and Jake Fear might be coming after her to make her his bride, I guess, in death. It's weird, but you'll learn more context later on in the story. But during this point, we also are getting more journal entries from Jake Fear and him going into more elaboration about his health deteriorating when he met this young girl the year prior and how it led to his death, essentially. And once we get the final journal entry, this ties into the phenomenon that kicks off the rest of the story around like the 100-page mark, because this book's like 181 pages. For the remainder of the story, Amy tries to convince her friends who are trying to, get dressed up in costumes on Halloween night and possibly might be trying to stage some pranks, depending on the character. And of course, it starts with the first name on the list, and that's the name of the local blacksmith in town. So she, Amy recruits the help of Richard and maybe her best female friend to go check on this blacksmith that she had this vision of, who dies in a very graphic fashion involving a head injury. It's very brutal. And when they go to the blacksmith's shop, they notice that there's blood on this anvil and the blacksmith is missing. And if you put two and two together, obviously something probably bad has happened to them, and they possibly stumble across his body to get confirmation that things might be awry. But Richard, of course, is like, all right, Amy, nice prank. And she's like, no, 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 no. I can't believe you think I'm pranking you. No, this is actually real. And he doesn't even buy that there's actual blood on the anvil, because at this point, he's, like I said, desensitized to the claims Amy is making. But once it becomes more clear that Jake Fear possibly is in the woodwork, and we see him, possibly do something to Giles involving some tree limbs, entering some orifices of the body and exiting out of certain entry points. And once we got caught up to speed with that, and once we get caught up to speed that this Halloween party that is taking place at this farmhouse, possibly having Jake Fear turn up there as a party goer and trying to lure Amy's best girlfriend, who's third on the list, and what transpires with that, and the remaining members of the group trying to follow her to keep her safe, but we see what happens to her involving a knife and all that in a very graphic fashion. And once we see all that, it becomes more clear to these characters that Jake Fear possibly is alive and is trying to finish out this list that he put on the church door. And the final person that he needs to kill is Richard. And we see possibly what becomes of Richard, and possibly what Amy and her friend Everett, who are the last two next to Richard, decide to do to Jake Fear to get them out of the situation. And once they think that it's all done, and there's a certain character that's like a pastor of the church that comes into the fold that might have some significance to the story in terms of the major parts of the story and in the resolution, we get a very dark ending involving the remaining characters in question, and a very grim outlook for what's about to go down. But we don't actually get to see what's going to go down, but we understand that it's not over. And the safety that we thought that they might have possibly isn't there. And that, in a nutshell, is what you're going to expect out of Door of Death here. So first and foremost, I'm going to be upfront. I think that this book is a big, refreshing book for this series. I know that all the Fear Street Sagas books takes place in the past, so this hardly is unique for this story. But for the first Fear Street Sagas book that I personally read, I really enjoyed that this book took place entirely in the year of 1853 and 1854. It doesn't have the greatest Prouse writing on Wiener's part here to make the story feel lived in as you would expect with R.L. Stine writing. Uh, It depends on, of course, his effort that he's trying to put into the books. But nonetheless, while that's kind of lacking, this time period for Shadyside still is very serviceable. And the way these characters are written in terms of their dialogue and the way they're described to be, uh, fashionable, or the way the houses look in the neighborhood, or how they decorate for Halloween in the 1800s, it's still atmospheric, and it really glues you into the story, and it sets this somber mood that is gloomy, and there's impending doom coming. There's like a bad omen from the beginning of the story that you know is going to unfold. And part of what makes that work, comparing these two things and how they work very good together, is the atmosphere, and then you have the pace of the story. Now, this isn't a briskly paced book by any means. If I had to say anything, this is probably best considered a slow burn. So if you're not into slow burns, you're probably not going to be into this, and I can totally see if you're going to be bored within like the first 80 pages of it, because essentially nothing is happening. Because if I'm being honest, there's some fake out pranks here that do get kind of annoying, but they serve I guess a purpose in the story, unlike most books that have fake outs. um but if you can look past that, um I think that at the same time, while there's some annoying things there with like the fake outs and some annoying character things that do kind of get irritating at times, there is that sense of dread that's slowly but surely building. And we know that this character Jake Fear is going to be coming near the end. And I'm going to be honest, y'all. Jake Fear is a goated Fear Street villain. Absolutely goated. He's incredible. Absolutely incredible. The stuff that they're able to do with his character here feels like Freddy Krueger. It really does. And there's an aspect to the concept of the story that feels like Final Destination with Jake Fear's character, and it involves the list and how it operates. Essentially, Jake Fear goes one by one down the list in order, and he does not skip who's next. He's going to continue on until that person is taken care of. Now, he only has one night to do it all on All Hallows Eve, but still, like, it feels like Final Destination with the list, and it feels like Freddy Krueger with how he acts and behaves. There are some creepy scenes with this guy. There's a scene involving a graveyard that I don't think I really touched on, but there's a scene in the story at a certain point where Amy's out in the local cemetery, and she goes by Jake Fear's grave when she's looking for her best friend. And there's a scene where she's like looking at the grave, and a hand comes out of the soil, and we see this decrepit, rotten corpse of Jake Fear just come out of the ground, grab Amy by the throat, and essentially gives her a kiss. And it's the way it's described is disgusting, and it's horrifying. Like, if that happened to you, that would be scary as all get out. I don't know what else to tell you. If you don't find stuff like that creepy, there's something wrong with you. I mean, and that's not the only scene that really got to me in this book. The kills are really creative and brutal. I mean, the death of the female character that's on the list in this book is so violent. Like, some people might be questioning why the girl got killed in the most extremely violent way in the story, but holy crap. And even like the tree limb kill involving Giles, that was gnarly. Just to imagine how that would look. Now, if you would have pulled this off in a movie setting, I guarantee you Netflix, if they put this on the Fear Street movie series, it probably would have been CGI, maybe half practical, but it still would have been very intriguing to see how that would have popped on screen, because there's certain body parts that get damaged in the process, let's just say, and it's really brutal. The characters that meet death in this book die in excruciating, brutal, and violent ways. And it's absolutely fantastic to read. And it's all thanks to Eric Weiner's emphasis on Jake Fear being just an out in front villain. He's not hidden in the shadows. It's not some whodunit murder mystery. No, this is a straight up slasher book. And it's fun. It's absolutely fun. And the concept really does make it pop too. As far as the characters, now I don't mind Amy as a main character. She does have some irritating things with like her romantic connection with her love interest in the story, Richard. And Richard is not the brightest bulb in the box. Early on, he's like an incel, and over time, he starts to get a grip on the situation and starts to actually buy into what happens to Amy. And then there's like this recontextualization near the end because of the motive of Jake Fear, which I don't want to give away because I think that would actually spoil a whole lot more than what I actually did give away here. But let's just say the motive is outright unlikable, and it not only makes you not like him, but not like another character that we were supposed to be made to like. And the way Amy is written in that situation when she uncovers this information is also just unlikable because you would think that she would be like, oh yeah, screw this guy. No, she tries to defend him and refuses to believe that that actually happened. And I'm just like, okay, whatever. Amy, you're a lost cause. But there's more good moments with these characters than bad, I should say. There's some funny humor going on. Everett is a funny character. Giles, he's made to be annoying, but he's like that charmingly annoying kind of character. And when Amy's with her girlfriend in the story, the two of them have good chemistry and some decent conversations going on. This isn't, like I said, this isn't the best Prouse book. This isn't a monologue heavy book. You don't really get to know much about them, but the way that they're written, you get to see that they have a well established friend group. They have history together and they have good chemistry. And sometimes that's all you need to have, you know, at the very least, serviceable characters. And that's how I feel about this. Like, I feel like most Fear Street books register. There's very few books that I've read so far from the young adult, landscape that have characters that are memorable in like a traditional way. So, yes, serviceable characters here. And one last positive I can throw at it is that while it is a slow burn, and while it can be a little boring because of that, not like uninteresting boring, but like, okay, can we get on with the Jake Fear stuff? I will say that the introspectives of Jake being thrown into the story with like his journal entries was really cool. And I like Fear Street books that offer different POVs or point horror books, what have you. So that was a plus. When it comes to negatives, I already kind of touched on them with like the characters of Richard and Amy, so I'm not going to get too much into it. But my biggest negative actually with this book, if it's not that it has its slow parts within like the first 80 pages of it being a slow burn, it's like mostly surrounding the fake outs in the first half, where we have not only, a whole prank sequence orchestrated by Amy to get back at Richard and Giles. There's also fake outs involving dreams throughout the rest of the book, where Amy's getting like these psychic premonitions of people dying, and they're not the real deaths that end up happening, and it just kind of feels like page filler. And if that's like the worst thing that you can have, that's not too egregious, but it's still annoying. And I will say that if you're not a fan of slow burns, I can totally see people wanting to just fast forward and just start to speed read around this mid portion because of those things. And to accompany that, there is some you gotta believe me with Amy's character, and I hate you gotta believe me, where the character has to constantly, oh, this is happening, you have to believe me. It's using the boy who cried wolf trope in the story with Amy, even though her friends should probably believe her. I understand why they're desensitized to it. And going back to what I said, the stuff with like the fake outs, they do offer a purpose here because these are the inciting incidents of how Jake Fear comes into the fold. Now, I will say, if you want to be also a stickler on this, this could be also considered like one last negative. How Jake Fear actually comes back is very vague, and there's like multiple things that could be interpreted. Is it Richard and Giles bringing him up that resurrected him? Is it the fact that Richard and Giles were doing pranks that pissed him off to make him come back? Is it um, the ritual that Amy and her friend does to see the vision of Amy's future husband? Is that what brings him back? It's very vague on that, but the commonality of it all circumvents around it's the power of Halloween. It's something that you're going to have to put disbelief at the door with. It's fine for this, and I would totally understand if you don't like that aspect. But like I said, if you wanted to throw that into the ring, I guess we can knock it there. But all said and done, even with its problems, I found myself being wanting to be more forgiving with this book, just because of the big old swing and humongous hit that they landed here with the main villain, Jake Fear, and the things that they were able to do in this book was outright chilling. And when it comes to a Fear Street book, this is like young adult trash. I'm looking to be entertained. I'm looking for some kills, some violence, and a semi fun and entertaining story, or a very fun, entertaining story. And I feel like I got it here. So from a 0 to 5 star basis, given those problems I had a ceiling with it, but this is kind of like an asterisk grade because without Jake Fear, this would be lower than a 4. But because Jake Fear is so good, I'm willing to give this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is an exceptional read. Y'all need to go check this out, like I said early on in the video. Do yourself a favor and go check this out and see how you like it. I think there's something in here for everyone. So, yeah. That's all I have to say about Fear Street Saga's Door of Death. Let me know down in the comment section if you've read this book before. Did you love it? Did you hate it? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.